A lot of studies have shown improvements of depression, anxiety, mental health just by exercising, right? And a lot of us know that, but again, we're going to get into the why. Everybody here wants to live stronger, better. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be like this when I'm older. I'd rather be like this, right? So I want to maintain that muscle as long as possible to keep me healthy, mobile, strong, functioning well until the day that I die. My topic was muscle medicine. That's one of the things I do, and it's about the role of myokines. So what I do is I'm a health and performance optimization physician, and my main focus is hormonal fitness and what I call muscle medicine. I don't think there's a lot of people really talking about that, and I basically want to bring it more attention, especially at the Olympia, that muscle is an endocrine organ, and it has a lot of roles besides just making us look good, right? So I want to bring more attention to that. So I'll skip through the abstract I'm going to talk about later, but a nice little quote, from Albert Einstein about any fool can know. The point is to understand. The reason I put that is because a lot of people understand, they hear things why they work, but why? If you understand, a lot of times when you understand why they work, it sinks in and they apply more. A lot of us, yes, I know I need to lift weights. I know I need to exercise, but why? I know it does this, but why? And some people just don't care. But for me, I know when I really get it, it sinks in my head and it means a lot more to me emotionally. I'm more inclined to stick to it. So anyway, again, understanding, big difference between knowing a thing and understanding it. So just to back out a little bit of view from 3,000 feet before we go down this long winding road of myokines is why is this important? And again, what are the benefits of muscle, right? Everybody knows, of course, it has involved metabolism. It improves our insulin sensitivity, handles blood sugar, of course, movement, function, importance of bone health and strength. It's a powerful anti-inflammatory and very involved in disease prevention, mitochondrial health, and even a mental emotional state. A lot of studies have shown improvements of depression, anxiety, mental health just by exercising, right? And a lot of us know that, but again, we're going to get into the why. And a more powerful one, at least probably everyone here, but no, for me, people like, well, I want to live longer, right? Everybody here wants to live stronger, better. And just a graphical representation of people that basically, all it says is basically over the age of 60 that, all-cause and cancer-associated mortality was twice as likely in individuals with low compared to high muscle strength and cardiorespiratory fitness. So not only building muscles, it's not just going to make you look better, but you're going to live longer and you have less likely die of heart disease and cancer disease, which are the two top killers of men and women, right? So go where the money's at. And again, the dangers of sarcopenia. This is a great place to talk about this. This is one of the reasons why I preach on my patients and my clients is that because you don't want to lose muscle. We all are going to lose muscle as we get older, but it's more than just not looking good. You become frail, you lose your balance, you can get more osteoporosis, you lose insulin sensitivity, you get fat, right? And visceral fat, the dangerous kind underneath the organs that causes inflammation and a lot of the chronic diseases we're suffering from. It affects your metabolism, weak, infirmed, and it can affect your activities of daily living. And the chances are more than likely we're going to lose it by the time we get in our 40s, 50s, and even 60s. By the time we get to be 80, maybe 60% of 80-year-olds are going to be affected by sarcopenia, and up to 25% of those 60-year-olds. So it's statistically a big problem, right? And there's a lot of factors that lead into this. Again, as we become older, become less active, changes in hormones, we lose motor units, mitochondrial dysfunction, and inflammation, and much more. And again, just another slide kind of talking about this. I'm going to skip through that one in the interest of time. But basically, many factors can lead to our loss of muscle. It's not just inactivity, but as we all know, inflammation is kind of the poster boy of public enemy number one nowadays for causing problems is inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction. Especially through this whole pandemic, we've learned about how important it is the mitochondria, our immune system is, how much lifestyle, cytokine storms, all these different things can affect our health. So as we get older, this is what we think of, right? I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be like this when I'm older. I'd rather be like this, right? So I want to maintain that muscle as long as possible to keep me healthy, mobile, strong, functioning well until the day that I die. So again, aging a muscle, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but why does it happen? Sorry for that cutoff. I made this on a Mac, so it's a conversion issue, but we get anabolic resistance. Our muscles become a little bit more resistant to building muscle, right? Diminished ability to build, and there's different reasons for this, but we lose fiber types. I think one of the gentlemen earlier talked about the different muscle fibers, type 1s, type 2s. We tend to shift back towards a type 1. We lose those fast twitch muscle fibers. So we good at just kind of walking, but we lose that ability to move. How many 80-year-olds do you see doing sprints or doing Tabatas or whatever? We lose that. Again, everybody's heard about muscle mitochondrial dysfunction, right? There's the powerhouses of our cells is the classic, how most people think about this. But there's many cellular actions that lead to this. And there's a ton of mitochondria in our muscle, which is why they're red. They're filled with them. And we lose mitochondria, we lose muscle. And again, we lose some abilities of the cells to basically perform what they're supposed to do, and this can lead to aging of the muscle. And again, it's also involved some other more geeky topics here for, NAD metabolism, SERT activity. People will hear about people talking about longevity and muscle mass and SERTs and NADs. NAD basically the body's ability to produce energy. So when we're talking about some of the myokines and how they're involved with the aging of the muscle, gut health. Gut health is a huge issue nowadays, right? And it's the source of many, many ills. And if our microbiome's off, our gut health is off, this affects everything. How many people have mental issues or depression, anxiety because of their guts off? Same thing with their muscles. And it can, all these different things can affect that, right? And we talked about inflammation and of course, metabolites, right? With the gut, it's important too, because a lot of these metabolites are made in the gut, these short chain fatty acids, urolithin A, and all these NAD precursors that people read about NAD and getting NAD infusions, but it's much more beneficial to have your body make it on its own, right? And then it's done, it goes through the normal pathways. So overall, basically, our body loses the muscle, it gets older. We lose the ability of what's called autophagy. Everybody's heard about autophagy, how our cells are constantly cleaning themselves up, getting rid of the bad stuff and building new stuff. There's more oxidation and stress. Think of like rust in your body, increased dying of the cells, the signaling pathways, how they communicate to each other get thrown off, and overall, we lose muscle mass. This is just a graphical representation as we get older, showing what happens with these muscle fiber types. And this is kind of the abstract of what I'm going to talk about. This came directly from a research paper talking about myokines. And basically, myokines are everybody's heard of cytokines, protein molecules signal, they communicate from the cells telling one cell to do something else, right? Myokines are those ones that are produced by the muscle cells. And they can mediate communication between the muscle and many, many other organs, which we're going to talk about. I'll go through all these. So I won't go through all this, but basically discovered this, many years ago, found out that muscles exert actions on other organs. They found out that, they had an action on, like, for example, other tissues, even when they cut the nerves, and it still did something. So they found there had to be something floating around in the blood from the muscle telling the other organs to do something else. And there's been over 600 of these myokines that have been identified, and they play a role in controlling energy supply during exercise, muscle proliferation, growth of new muscle tissue, and signaling to many other tissues throughout, again, what I listed there. And they have many anti-cancer effects. So muscle to muscle is a big one, and probably a lot of people have heard of some of these, but everybody's heard of like myostatin, right? It was a member of myokine that was negatively regulates, as people found that when there's a lot of, myostatin can adversely affect muscle growth. So these other myokines like IL-6, 15, 7, these other two called muscarinin and LIF actually have an opposite role of that, right? They can play a role in myogenesis or growth of muscle tissue, and they stimulate the proliferation of muscle cells. It can also reduce inflammation and activate a molecule, which everybody's probably heard of, called mTOR, which is, again, one of the molecules that's involved with muscle growth, anabolism, and muscle growth and repair. Again, IL-6, it also improves our body's ability to handle blood sugar, improves insulin sensitivity, and actually can increase fat oxidation. This is one of the reasons why we get more insulin sensitive. It can burn more fat by building our muscle up. This is like one of the gentlemen talked about earlier. Strength training is much more effective, and this is one of the reasons why. I remember I talked about why does it work. This is one of the ways that it works, through these myokines. So it can, again, increases uptake of of glucose, increase fatty acid oxidation, and usually through what's called AMPK pathway. And we all know about physical inactivity, right? As we get less active, we accumulate visceral fat, and we don't make these myokines. There's a lot of talk amongst the muscle and the brain as well. Again, IL-6, we're going to see this a lot. It can actually reduce appetite, and can actually increase production of a chemical in the brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which has a lot of beneficial effects on mood, appetite control, cognitive function, and much, much more. Also, these two other called cathepsin and irisin are also involved with this as well. Again, we talked about earlier about physical exercise, how it has positive effects on cognitive function. I alluded to that earlier with about depression, anxiety. This is why a lot of people who have mood disorders, it's also very beneficial to actually give them a prescription for exercise, because it has a lot of effects. And don't just reach for the Paxil, right? Just by doing activity and building muscle, you can reduce stress, anxiety, sleep, mood, and much, much more. So it's also involved in, again, neurogenesis, learning, and cognitive function as well, which I just alluded to above. Very important in appetite. Again, you can get elevated levels of that myokine called IL-6. It's been linked to diabetes and to obesity and metabolic syndrome and much more. The bottom line is that by doing exercise, we're going to get fluctuations in IL-6, which is actually going to control this. It's going to improve your glucose metabolism and reduce appetite. And it has a lot of anti-inflammatory effects that may play a role in body weight control, not just by controlling insulin and the fat burning like I talked about earlier, but also working in the brain to reduce appetite. And here's another graphical representation of that. Again, IL-6 is going to help with burning that visceral fat, and it's also going to help with what we call beiging or browning of fat. A lot of people have heard about how we can convert white fat tissue into brown fat tissue, which is brown fat tissue is more that metabolically active. It's going to burn off more calories as heat, so it can lead to weight loss. And again, it also works by burning the fat tissues itself, a process called lipolysis. And then talking about that here, again, it does this through that AMP activation. I think a lot of people have heard about AMPK and how we can basically decrease visceral fat. And again, of course, exercise, when you exercise, you're going to burn that fat. But this is one of the other ways it does it, through these chemical myokines like IL-6 and irisin that's going to actually literally help you burn off that fat. So again, I talked about the browning of the fat here, and it can, I'm not going to go through all the pathways, but again, bottom line is going to convert some of that nasty white fat into brown fat, which is going to help you burn off more calories and lose that visceral fat. Muscle and bone also, and we talked about myostatin earlier, but these other myokines can actually improve bone formation. As we get older, everybody worries about osteoporosis, getting thin bones. We all probably have family members who have osteopenia or osteoporosis. We want to prevent that as much as possible. So muscle mass, it only explains about 20% of that bone mineral density. So the bottom line is that with these myokines like IGF-1 and IL-6, is actually going to improve bone remodeling. So you actually maintain that muscle mass, and you're not going to get those thin, brittle bones and risk when you fall. You're going to be able to get up. You're not going to get that broken hip that you hear about all the time. Muscle is also very important for crosstalk with the liver. We all know how important the liver is, but it basically helps our body to handle exercise, right? As we all know, we burn through glucose, and we have to burn off our glycogen and convert fuel into sugar, so into glucose, so we can use it during exercise. So the bottom line is these myokines like IL-6 can actually help trigger appropriate glucose output and insulin and glucagon output. And this is mainly controlled, of course, by diet and exercise, right? So in the gut, IL-6 can stimulate GLP in the cells and improves insulin secretion and delays gastric emptying. What's that sound like? Everybody's familiar with semaglutide and Ozempic. I mean, I use these a lot in my patients, but this is one of the ways our bodies actually make this, and we can improve this. This is one of the ways it works, and there's different foods and nutrients you could take to improve adiponectin and IL-6 and GLP-1 secretion on your own, certain prebiotic fibers, certain types of nuts, etc., which I'm not going to get into, but by building that muscle, by improving these myokines, you can actually help your body make more of its own GLP-1. So you may not even need to be on that medicine if you can do it appropriately. So kind of cool. And again, in the pancreas, same thing. Everyone knows how important, what a big problem insulin resistance, prediabetes is. What is it, like almost half the U.S. population is pre-diabetic or insulin resistant in some way, shape, or form. So again, the muscles communicate with the pancreas, right? It improves insulin sensitivity, and it can prevent what's called apoptosis of the pancreas cells, meaning, in other words, it just lowers inflammation and prevents those cells called beta cells in the pancreas that make insulin. It prevents them from dying and keeps them young and viable and strong. Sorry, I like my superheroes, so you're going to see a lot of superhero pictures in here, guys. All right, vascular. Again, I know Dr. O'Connor was talking about vascular, right? And this is big, and I help with a lot of my patients, improving their vascular tone naturally, right? And by lowering blood pressure, reducing that inflammation. And again, this crosstalk between muscle and the vascular bed is very important too. And again, multiple more myokines like follistatin like 1, they call it, and basically has cardioprotective effects and helps basically improve cardiac function and blood vessel. And one of the ways it does this is by improving nitric oxide synthesis. So we all have heard of nitric oxide, how it can cause dilation of blood vessels, improve blood pressure and blood flow. Most of the ladies out there interested in their skin, the myokines like IL-15 are very helpful for improving skin health too. Helps us keep young and healthful. Very important for inflammation. The bottom line here is that it can control inflammation, right? Especially like IL-6 can lower the inflammatory cytokines. We've all probably heard about tumor necrosis factor. We heard about that during COVID, but it can increase the anti-inflammatory cytokines like IL-10 and improves our cortisol response. When we exercise, we have a big burst of cortisol, right? Which acutely can be good. It can actually, if you do it right, it can actually help you to burn fat. But the problem is you don't want to have chronically elevated cortisol all the way through and after your workout for the rest of the next 2, 3, 4 hours, because then as too much cortisol is a bad thing. It can be catabolic. So we want to get it spiked up during a workout, burn that fat, build that muscle, and then lower it quickly. And one of the ways that we can do that is by obviously going back into parasympathetic state with breath work, using carb. That's why, again, the bro science, right? Bodybuilders are big on protein and carbs after workout. This is one of the reasons. Carbohydrates can lower that acute cortisol response. So there's actually ways you can time your cortisol to get those benefits. Also important with cancer as well, right? So again, we all know how important physical activity is for improving cancer, right? And people with all different types of cancer, prostate, colorectal, breast, etc. Basically, those who are more active, lower risk of cancer and dying because of this. Why? That's why we tell everybody, again, use exercise as a prescription, because that movement does many, many things. But this is one of the ways that it does it, by these myokines. It has these anti-inflammatory effects, anti-cancer effects. And again, there's a lot of other kinds, right? These are the whole broad terms called exokines, myokines. There's all these different things. And some of these have people like leptin have heard of leptin and things like this, but there's other ones, IGF-1, there's heat shock proteins that are involved that can be helpful for muscle building and recovery. And people have heard about like using sauna therapy and exercise and strength training to boost these heat shock proteins, which can be very anabolic and burning fat. So, all right, so what do we do about this? So how do we improve our myokines, right? Therapies. So the biggest one, of course, is lifestyle, right? Exercise, appropriate amino acid intake and nutrition. Caloric restriction can be useful. It gets a little sketchy as you get older because some people, as we all know, a lot of people fast too darn much, but sometimes if they're too inflamed, just a short round or some cycling in and out of some fasting can actually help with that process I talked about earlier, that kind of kill those old decrepit cells and build some new ones. So properly timed, it can be very helpful. Briefly, HRT and peptides, and of course, exercise mimetics and then some more advanced strategies too. So again, number one, exercise, right? That's why we're here at the Olympia. Everybody hit the darn weights, right? I won't go into this too much, but there's a lot of what they call exercise mimetics, appropriate NAD production in our bodies, which can be facilitated with proper nutrition, fasting strategies, niacinamide. Of course, everybody's heard of things like NR and NMN to boost NAD. There's SERT activators like resveratrol, which can improve mitochondrial biogenesis, energy expenditure, endurance capacity, anti-inflammatory effects. Mitochondrial uncouplers are kind of a little trick sometimes I'll use, and there's a whole bunch of them that you can be used, but can actually help your body to uncouple and actually burn more, I don't want to say waste, but burn more fuel as energy to give off more heat. So you can actually be taking the same amount of calories, but burning off more heat. Heat can help with a little bit with fat loss. Same thing with AMPK. Everybody's heard of the balance between AMPK and mTOR. Everybody's, when you're eating and you're lifting, you're building mTOR to build muscle. And if you're not eating as much or you're fasting, you're going to boost AMPK, right, to help with fat loss and that autophagy I talked about. But again, it's all about cycling and rotating in and out of these strategies. But you can, obviously, there's some other strategies as well to boost AMPK. A lot of people have used things like berberine and metformin and resveratrol. Camphor is another interesting one that I've played around with as well. And glutathione antagonists can be very helpful. I talked about inflammation and managing that glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body. And we want to get rid of any inflammation and quiet that down as much as possible. And in our stress toxic society, we need as much help as that as possible. So sometimes just giving the precursors to be helpful. Glynac is a great one too that you can dose throughout the day to make your body make more of its own natural glutathione. You can take glutathione, but it's not always very bioavailable unless you get a liposomal formulation. But sometimes, again, I'm a big fan of just trying to give the body what it needs to make it on its own, whether it's in the gut or in the cells. I've used the cellular hydration formulas. I think Betsy's familiar with this as well. But one of the groups we're in, we have a kind of a unique blend of amino acids and formed to help with cellular hydration. That cellular hydration response is actually very anabolic to the tissues. And by properly hydrating the cells and giving it what it needs, you can actually increase that volume in the cells, which provides its own anabolic response on top of just feeding it with amino acids. And of course, there's a million supplements out there to help with anabolism and muscle growth and healthy muscle tissue, right? And these can, again, have to be rotated in the right way at the right time. You don't want to just throw all these in and just take it because it could cause problems, right? And there's a lot of them out there, ursotic acid, oxytocin, HMB, epicatechin. I like the immunoglobulins and colostrum are fantastic, and collagen is big too for not just the muscle, but all the connective tissues that you need as well. Peptides, I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. Well, I've heard, and Betsy and the rest of the crew were talking about this, and of course, with the FDA, taking a few of these away, unfortunately, but they're very helpful. Growth hormone and IGF-1 are very beneficial for helping the body to maintain that muscle mass, right? They help with use of fuels called beta oxidation, anti-inflammatory, improve satellite cell activation. The satellite cells are basically the young cells that are going to churn and grow new muscle tissue, and they can decrease that cellular senescence, meaning that old muscle tissue just kind of sitting and rotting away, turning into the zombie cells everybody's heard of. We want them young, strong, and healthy. As we get older, of course, we lose growth hormone. It goes down over age, same with IGF-1, sometimes as early as our 30s and 40s. So basically, we want to make more of that, right? It's made in our brains and our pituitary gland and secreted. And basically, once it hits the liver, it binds to and creates and secretes IGF-1, which has a lot of beneficial effects on the bone, the muscle, the brain, and much, much more. So previously, we used a lot of GHRHs, growth hormone releasing hormones, and growth hormone releasing peptides. But of course, again, we've got a few left, but some of my favorites have been taken here or may potentially be taken away by the FDA. But they have a lot of great benefits on the body in terms of metabolic homeostasis and, basically, again, involved with cell proliferation, differentiation. Basically helps the muscle tissue to grow and to maintain that anabolic state while burning. It can be helpful with burning fat at the same time. So helps with energy production, improvement of deep sleep, especially REM sleep, injury repair and healing, metabolism, fat loss, again, maintaining and increasing that lean muscle mass and reduction of inflammation. So a nice little graphical kind of presentation. Now, it's not that anabolic, right? But it can definitely help maintain that muscle tissue. But it's also great for maintaining skin and connective tissues and a decrease in fat. Again, I kind of went through all this, same with the GHRPs. Again, a lot of these may no longer be around either, but ipamorelin, I use a lot of it, very, very effective. One, PEG-MGF was another one, again, involved with a protein synthesis. It can be used locally to increase IGF-1 and be used locally in the muscle to help, for example, if you had an injury or if you had a lagging muscle that you want to bring up, you could actually use that in a very short cyclical fashion to help with anabolic response. 5-amino-1-MQ is another cool medication we've used, and won't get into the geeky stuff, but the bottom line is it can help with energy expenditure, reduction of body fat, improvement of insulin sensitivity, and improved gut health. And this is one of the ways it helps with fat loss and muscle growth by improving your microbiome through especially like lactobacillus species. And it helps with energy production, and the bottom line is it can help with strength, muscle mass, and performance, and fat loss, kind of like the trifecta. It's a cool little molecule. MADA-C is another one. It's a mitochondrial peptide. And there's a couple other ones out there in case this one gets taken away too, but it also improves fatty acid metabolism, again, helping basically with exercise capacity, mitochondrial health, and again, body composition. And of course, hormones are first and foremost. I deal with this with most of my patients. I've been doing the hormones for many, many years. And of course, we talked about testosterone. Many other physicians and practitioners today talked about it as well. Of course, we all know that it can help with anabolism. It prevents that age-related fiber shift that I talked about earlier and help with protein synthesis, improves insulin sensitivity. A lot of people forget that it has a powerful anti-inflammatory effects on the body, and lowering oxidative stress, which is important for many. This is, again, one of the reasons why testosterone does so much for the body, men and women. It's not just about building the muscles, but it's reducing that inflammation, and it's reducing that oxidative stress. And again, there's myokines involved too, right? Especially irisin. I'm not sure how you say it, but I say it irisin. But testosterone has involved with irisin production and vice versa, which can, as I talked about earlier, has a lot of beneficial effects on the body, muscle, and more. And the bottom line is it can basically help with building muscle, burning fat, and again, reducing that inflammation. I just love this graphic. It's corny as hell, but I put it in there because everybody's probably seen it, but it's, pictures speak 1,000 words, right? So I won't go through this, but the bottom line is, again, always about foundational nutrition, exercise, optimizing your hormonal environment, it's going to help you build a muscle to secrete those myokines, which are going to cause even more healthy muscle. So it's a beautiful cycle. And again, just another graphic from the paper. Bottom line, you need many things. Mechanotransduction, in other words, you need to lift some weights. You need to lift some heavy stuff, and you're going to control your neurologic environment, your eat right, fuel your body, and you're going to help maintain muscle fiber health and build those satellite cells so you can build muscle, called hypertrophy. So again, my Muscle Medicine RX, again, first and foremost, nutrition, whole food diet, feeding that gut, right? We talked about that earlier, a lot of prebiotics, fermented foods, or prebiotic fibers, resistant starches to help heal the gut. Proper training, strength training, cardio, and even more importantly, recovery. So many of the clients I work with, I've got your average mom and pop, but I've got bodybuilders, powerlifters, MMA guys, and a lot of them I have to pull back, and say, because they're just overtraining. If you're not recovering, you're not going to build muscle. So I always tell them to train hard, but recover harder, and you'll be amazed at the results that you get. Supplementation, of course, there's 3 bazillion supplements out there you can take, but again, the focus should be, again, on the mitochondria, on the gut health, on that cellular metabolism pathway, building the muscle, immune support, and it can be even epigenetic and cellular specific. I've done epigenetic tests and gut health tests that we can give them exactly what their body needs. You want to just throw a whole bunch of stuff at them if they don't need it. So these tests, even though sometimes they can be a little expensive, but they're very helpful if you really need to target it down. But again, so many athletes, especially being here at Olympia, people overtrain, they get injuries. So immune support, gut health is massively important because a lot of these people are cutting weight. They're overdoing it in the gym, so they need to build those tendons. They need to heal their gut. They're starving themselves, or they're doing all these different crazy strategies. They got to heal. HRT is foundational for this. Testosterone, DHEA, and estradiol, and of course, growth hormone, IGF, thyroid, and of course, others. And I definitely always focus on all these, testosterone, DHEA, and of course, DHT is very important as well. And interestingly, a lot of the benefits from testosterone, people think it actually comes from its conversion to estradiol and DHT, especially the visceral fat burning, libido, bone health, and more. Most of that comes from the estradiol and the DHT. So that's why you don't want to leave your estrogen alone. We've talked about that, and then peptide therapy as well. So that's kind of what I do. I really focus on cellular nutrition and fitness with very targeted nutraceuticals, more of a precision medicine approach with personalized hormone optimization, cutting edge medical peptide therapy, and unique protocols. And I try to intertwine everything. I look at the lifestyle, genetics, and epigenetics, gut health, metabolism, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and recovery work like we talked about earlier. And again, if you just start doing these things on a regular basis, you get those habits built in place to you maintain that healthy muscle, so we don't get old and stooped over like that one picture. So I love this quote. And again, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So start these habits now, get them going. So feel free to reach out to me. There's my websites and my social media. If anybody has any questions, happy to do. Hopefully, I know it's the end of the day. I try to go through probably a little quicker than I should have, but I do talk fast, but I'm sure everybody's tired, so I didn't want to drag it out. But if anybody has any questions, let me know. Thank you.
We've barely scratched the surface for your hormonal health. If you like content like this, check out our other videos that discuss hormone health and optimization. And for future content, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss anything. To your health and optimal hormones. See you next time. This is Mike.